I welcome you all to the module 7 of this course and lecture number 15. So, this is the second lecture of module 7 and overall it is lecture number 15. So, we are discussing about humanistic perspective in terms of understanding personality. The first lecture of this module was on Maslow's theory, and today's lecture will be focusing on Carl Rogers' theory of personality. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. So, the last lecture was on Maslow's theory. So, and we started the lecture with the basic ideas of humanistic psychology. What are the core principles of humanistic psychology? We discussed some of the core principles. Then we talked about Maslow's theory of need hierarchy, where we tried to understand the different needs that Maslow talked about and how they can explain human motivation and the human behavior, and also can explain human personality. We also talked about the concept of meta needs or B values, which are connected to the individuals who are self actualized or who are in the process of self actualization, how these needs are important. We also discussed various characteristics of self actualizing individual as proposed by Maslow, and at the end we discussed the various criticism that are basically prevalent in terms of Maslow's theory. So, let us start today's lecture. So, today's lecture will be focusing on the Carl Rogers theory, and we will try to understand how Rogers theory connects to human personality and understanding the dynamics of human personality. So, we will be talking about the concept of actualizing tendency and how it is, what are its importance in the human development, actualizing tendency and how society interacts with the actualizing tendency. We will be talking about the concept of real self and ideal self. We will be also talking about the concept of fully functioning person as proposed by Carl Rogers, and in brief we will be talking about some of the major ideas behind client centered therapy as proposed by Carl Rogers, and at the end we will be discussing some criticism of Rogers theory. So, Carl Rogers basically his theory emerged from his clinical practice. So, he is very popular therapist, and most of the ideas of his theory actually evolved from his experiences with the clients and and the patients. So, Carl Rogers introduced a significant approach of psychotherapy. So, basically his theory is very closely linked to therapy, and initially he named his therapy as non-directed or client centered therapy. Later it was called as person centered therapy. So, basically the idea is the focus is on the patient or the person on whom the therapy is carried out rather than on the therapist. So, that is how the terminology is given for his therapy. This therapeutic method has sparked extensive research and remain prevalent in the counseling setting today. So, the therapeutic approach of Carl Rogers became so popular that we can still every schools of thoughts in terms of therapeutic schools of thoughts, they may differ in terms of techniques, but some of the basic principles of client centered therapy are used in all kinds of therapeutic sessions. So, that shows the impact of Carl Rogers idea on therapies and how popular it is and how significant it is. Obviously, his theory is rooted in humanistic psychology. Rogers' personality theory emphasizes patient therapist relationships as fundamental idea. So, because this whole theory came out of or evolved out of therapeutic session, so most of the ideas are related to therapies only. So, we will see the details of his theory later. So, unlike theories developed through laboratory experiments, Rogers formulated his theory based on his clinical experiences. A lot of other theories evolved from experiments and the field researches and other things, but Rogers theory actually evolved out of clinical experiences with the clients. So, that is one of the major difference. It has its similarity with the psychoanalysis also evolved from the therapeutic sessions. So, the Rogers used to call his patients as clients rather than patients. So, he was not using the term patients, he was using the term client. So, that is kind of more of a humanistic terminology given to the people who came for treatment. So, one of the central idea of humanistic psychology is self actualization. So, this was also important in Maslow's theory, and Carl Rogers also gave a detailed idea about self actualization, and it also plays very important role in the conceptualization of Carl Rogers theory. However, the conceptualization of self actualization differs a little bit in terms of how it is used from the Maslow's perspective. So, we will see how it is different from the Maslow's perspective. So, Carl Rogers emphasized the uniqueness of each individuals, asserting that clients are the best expert of themselves and are capable of solving their own problem. So, that is the basic idea of humanistic psychology, actually, the uniqueness of each individual. So, if you want to understand human beings, we need to focus on each individuals, because each individuals are unique individuals and they are the experts in terms of understanding themselves, So, we need to focus on those individuality in terms of understanding, human behavior. He believed that everyone has a natural tendency towards growth and self actualization. So, every individuals are motivated towards growth and self actualization. So, every individuals are there is inherent motivation within all of us that propels us towards growth and expansion in our life. So, this idea is very similar to what Maslow also said. It is very similar to Maslow's concept of innate positive drive to realize one's potential. This drive, which Rogers terms as actualizing tendency. So, he gave this term more specifically he called it as an actualizing tendency, is our primary motivator towards growth from birth. So, it is this actualizing tendency is within all of us and it propels us towards growth and expansion in life. Rogers said that people can cope with life and maintain psychological health as long as their actualizing potential is not obstructed. So, if we are in touch with that actualizing tendency and express our life in accordance with that actualizing tendency, then the psychological health and all the well-being will follow automatically, because that is the tendency of actualizing tendency, it will move towards well-being and so on. However, if that actualizing tendency is obstructed because of certain life circumstances, the pathology and ill-being, all kinds of problematic aspect could come into the picture. So, according to Rogers, psychological problem arise when this actualizing tendency is blocked for certain reasons. So, this is where it differs a little bit from Maslow's idea, where Maslow says it's more of a kind of need that one reaches after fulfilling some of the basic needs, but here Rogers conceptualizing self actualizing tendency is the more foundational overarching motivation within all of us, and if that is blocked, we are more likely to experience problems and psychological issues and ill being, and those kind of issues are more likely to be experienced. Rogers' conception of self actualization includes biological aspects such as drive for basic needs like food, water, sleep, safety, reproduction, and also psychological aspects which involves developments of one potential, qualities that enhance human worth. So, self actualization includes both the biological drive, which includes the need for basic food, water, safety and reproduction, and also it includes psychological aspects where when we grow, actualize our potentials, qualities that enhance human growth and so on, that is a part of psychological aspect of self actualizing tendency. Obviously, he focused more on psychological aspect because it is more important for psychological health, which was his main focus in terms of therapy and treatment. So, if you see Rogers' conceptualization of self actualization, he is including all the other needs, including physiological needs and safety needs that Maslow was talking about, different levels of needs. He is including all these other needs under self actualization. Maslow was considering self actualization as a peak need. When we fulfill all the other needs, then we reach self actualization. Here Roger is considering self actualization as superordinate motivation, which includes all the other aspects, including physiological needs like food, water, sleep, safety, reproduction and other things. All the needs are actually expression of self actualization need. So, that is another difference in terms of conceptualization of self actualization here from the Maslow's perspective. Rogers suggests that harmful behaviors develop only under adverse condition. When the environment is very adverse and person is not able to express his self actualizing tendency, then in those cases harmful behaviors and the negative behaviors are likely to be expressed by human beings, such as difficult environment or lack of freedom or to develop according to one's true nature. So, these conditions could block self actualization, leading psychological distress and antisocial behaviors and other problematic behaviors. Now, what is the role of actualizing tendency in development of human beings? If you see Rogers' theory, it is very in some sense like Freud is grounded on the clinical experiences. So, if you see psychoanalysis and Rogers' theory, both came from the clinical experiences and and the insight that are gained from extensive therapy sessions. But Rogers' theory is and both are very rich, mature in terms of characterized on logical coherence and the broad applicability. However, unlike Freud, who viewed human beings mostly from the pathological lens, Rogers sees human beings as fundamentally good or healthy. So, that is the basic idea of humanistic psychology. Rogers he interpreted human nature mostly in the positive light. He said human nature by definitions inherently they are good if they are allowed to express their actualizing tendency. Only negative behavior arises when that actualizing tendency is blocked by environmental conditions or certain harsh conditions. So, that is where it differs sharply from Freudian concepts. He perceived mental health as the natural state, as a natural state of being, with mental illnesses and other issues are distortion of this inherent tendency. When this actualizing tendency is distorted or blocked, then mental illnesses and other problems arises. Otherwise, if this is expressed naturally, then mental health is a natural outcome of that. Rogers' theory stand out for its simplicity and elegance. So, the ideas are very simple and very elegant, and it could explain a lot of ideas and centered around the central idea of actualizing tendency. So, that is the central idea of this theory. Around this concept all the other things actually came out, which is an intrinsic motivation in all life forms to realize their fullest potential. So, this is an intrinsic motivation that we all have, not only human being, even animals, even plants, and every life forms has this actualizing tendency. So, this drive is not merely for survival, but also striving to make best of the existence. So, Rogers argued that it is not that human being who only wants to expand their life and make best of their life. Every life form wants to express the best forms of their existence. Every animal is trying to make best use of their life and lead a best life. Even a plant also wants to express itself to the best of possibility. So, what is the basic fundamental commonality among all the animals and organisms is this actualizing tendency. Everyone is trying their best to express themselves to the best of their ability. Whether it is successful or not, that is a different story based on a lot of environmental things. Somebody is successful, somebody may not be successful, but that basic motivation is there within all life forms. So, that is common among all life forms, and that is why self actualizing tendency is common among all life forms. So, this is where it differs from Maslow's ideas also. Maslow considered is typically a human thing. When all the other basic needs are fulfilled, then only one reaches to self actualization. Here Roger is telling that the self actualizing tendency is within all of us, including animals, plants, and all the organisms. Now, Rogers argued that desire for air, let us say water, food, safety, love, competence, and even the drive to innovate and create, all stems from this fundamental motivation of actualizing tendency. So, he is encompassing all the other needs explained by Maslow as expression of self actualizing tendency itself. So, it is the more fundamental motivation. Under this all the other needs comes in kind of expression of that one need. Unlike Abraham Maslow, who applied self actualization primarily to humans, Rogers, as I already said, that extended this tendency to all living beings, including plants, fungi, and all the organisms. So, his basic idea is that every life form is trying their best to make best of their best use of their life forms and express to the best of their ability, and that is self actualizing tendency. He wonders at how life forms like weeds or saplings can thrive in harsh conditions, exemplifying this basic actualizing tendency. Even plants can try their best to survive even in harsh conditions. Rogers also applied this principle to larger ecosystems like forest and other things, suggesting that more complex ecosystem like forest possesses greater actualizing potential compared to simpler ones like cornfield. So, when we have a complex ecosystem like forest, the possibility of actualization is much more, because that there is much more complexities and possibilities in terms of expressing itself as compared to simpler ones. Rogers' theory suggests that individuals like ecosystem, so similar thing also applies to human life, will thrive if they live in alignment with the true nature. So, all human beings will thrive their life in terms of mental health, in terms of well-being will thrive if they are in alignment with this true nature, which is called actualizing tendency. By doing so, they will become increasingly complex, akin to forest, and this complexity will foster resilience and flexibility in the face of both minor and major life challenges. So, more we become kind of actualizing tendency, we are in touch with that, and in terms of community and groups, the more we express that, we are more likely to be resilient and able to face minor and the major problems of our life in much more better ways. Carl Rogers also talked about other concepts which are related to self-actualizing tendency, which will kind of connect all these concepts together in the model later. First, let us discuss the meaning of all these concepts. So, after self-actualizing tendency, Rogers also talked about concepts like organismic valuing, positive regard, positive self-regard. What are the meaning of these concepts? Let us see one by one. So, Rogers said that organisms inherently know what is beneficial for them. So, when he is saying organisms, he is not just talking about human beings, he is talking about all organisms, an idea which he called organismic valuing. So, it basically means every organism inherently there is an evolutionary tendency that tells us what is good for us. Every organism knows if they are left to their own actualizing tendency, they will know what is good for them. For example, if you leave an animal in the forest, they will only pick those things which are good for them in terms of food. So, if you leave a cow in the grassland, they will only pick those grasses which are good for them. So, evolutionary mechanism has given these propensities or tendency to know what is naturally good for them, and every animal knows what is good for them in terms of what should be picked. So, they will not pick anything which is harmful for their system, they will only pick those things which are good for their system, or automatically they know that. So, that is called as an organismic valuing. Human being also naturally should know what is good for them, but obviously in the concept, in the domain of human being, obviously things become much more complex. We have created so many artificial things around us that now we have lost that whole tendency of understanding what is right and good for us. So, that natural tendency is there within all of us, including human beings, but obviously we will talk about human beings little bit more elaborately. It is much more clear in other animals. They know what is good for them, because nobody needs to teach an animal what to eat and what not to eat. Automatically they pick what is right for them. So, evolution has equipped us with the senses and tastes that help us distinguish good from bad food, and what tastes good is usually nutritious in a typical sense, but we have many artificial good taste and many things we created which may not be good for us, while food that tastes bad is likely to be spoiled and harmful. So, evolution has naturally given this tendency of this taste bud to understand what is right and what is not right. This evolutionary mechanism guides us towards to pick what is right for us. So, that is called as an organismic valuing. Among the things that we value are positive regard. So, these are the terms that we should understand, then only we will kind of collect all the terms together in the model. So, next concept what Rogers proposed is called positive regard. So, positive regard is basically it encompasses love, affection, attention and nurturance. Every animals, every organisms, including every human beings, we all naturally want this positive regard from others. Everybody wants love, affection, attention, nurturance from other human beings. Babies, for instance, need love and attention to survive and thrive. Without such care, they will fail to develop. So, if you do not give this natural positive regard to a baby, it will not be able to survive. So, that is very important for survival, that, and even in the adult life also, for thriving in life, we need positive regard from other individuals. So, this is very important concept. So, one concept is organismic valuing, another is positive regard. The next concept that he talked about is called as positive self regard. So, it comes from positive regard to positive self regard. So, it is more about self esteem, how you regard yourself, how do you view yourself in terms of how worthy you are as an individual, what is your perception about yourself, that is positive self regard. So, if you have positive self regard, that means you have a positive view about yourself, positive perception about yourself. So, we develop generally positive self regard through positive regard. So, generally when people show positive regard to us, we generally develop also positive self regard. We also start loving ourselves or having a positive view about ourselves. If other people always neglects our, or they are that give kind of do not show love and nurturance towards us, we also develop negative view about ourselves. So somehow it is also connected to how others also kind of behaves with us, and that is how positive self regard could be connected to positive regard. During our upbringing, without positive self regard, we feel inadequate and fail to reach our potential. So positive regard is very important to reach our potential. In order to be in touch with self actualizing tendency, positive self regard is very important, and it is connected to positive regard given by other individuals. So Rogers, like Maslow, believe that left to their own devices, organisms tends to consume what is good for them in balanced amount. Babies also seems to innately prefer what they need. So babies also know innately, when a baby takes birth, automatically it knows what, when milk is given, automatically it knows to what extent it should be taken and no. So that's an evolutionary mechanism already inbuilt in all the organisms. However, what is happening with human being is that in our modern environment, it differs very significantly from one in which we evolved. So evolutionary, if you see the evolutionary circumstances, if you see our past history, the environments were quite different, very natural environment were there, but nowadays if you see, the environment has become much more artificial. We have created a complex world around us, and most of them are made by human beings only. So the environment is much significantly different from our earlier environment, and we introduce many artificial things like refined sugar, chocolate, and things which appeal to our organismic valuing but not support our actualization. So things which taste very good, for example, like things like chocolate or refined sugar, so they taste good and naturally we like to take them, but they may not help in actualizing tendency or support our actualization, because these are created artificially. So it is good to our taste, but may not be good to our actualization tendency and our health. So that is where the problem comes with human life, because of this artificial environment that we created, according to this Rogers perspective. Now Rogers said society plays very important role in the actualization, in the whole process of actualization. So we are just discussing all these terms. Now one term that in the context of society Rogers used called conditions of worth. Now condition of worth basically means this natural actualizing tendency which we all have can be blocked by these conditions of worth, which basically means from young age we receive what we need only when we are perceived as worthy by other people. So there are conditions to call you as a worthy individual. So you will be considered as a worthy individual only when you fulfill certain criteria in the society. So in society everything is, it moves in its own fashion. So people don't get unconditional regard, so people are not automatically loved in the society. People are loved, and positive regard is given only when they've they kind of fulfill certain conditions, which are called conditions of worth. It includes even certain conditions given by the parents to their children, teachers, peers, media, and so on. So from the childhood, for example, a child is said you are a good boy only when you behave in a certain way, or if you eat certain kind of food you will be given certain reward and so on. So that means child learns these are the conditions I should fulfill to be considered I am a worthy individual or a good individual. So like this, when you go to schools you have certain conditions, when you go to society there are many conditions. So lots of these conditions of worth surrounds us from our childhood to our whole life, and many times these conditions of worth may not be in tune with our actualizing tendency. You want to do something, but it may not be accepted or given importance by the people outside in the society. So when it is not given that acceptance, then that actualizing tendency could be blocked because of these conditions of worth. So that is another thing that comes from the society in the human context. So this is another term which is very important. Now these conditions of worth lead to conditional positive regard. So now in human world we get positive regard like love and affection only when we fulfill certain criteria. So parent will give love to their children, although we love to believe that parental love is unconditional, but that can be also conditional in many cases, because parent also expect that child should follow certain things, only then they get love and affections. Similarly, it goes to all the other people. So that is the idea called conditional positive regard. So you get love and affection on condition, So that is called conditional positive regard. So in society everything becomes conditional. So condition positive regard becomes conditional positive regard, and now where we receive positive feedback only under certain conditions, such as these conditions are very powerful, because we all want to get positive regard. So that is a very important motivations. To get that, we fulfill lot of criteria proposed or projected by other people, which can distort our behavior, which may not be in line with the actualizing tendency. So many times we are not able to fulfill our actualizing tendency, because we distort our behavior to fulfill positive regard or get positive regard from other people. This conditioning extend to self regard, which can become conditional positive self regard. Now you also respect yourself only when you fulfill those conditions. So that is called as a positive self regard. Your self regard also becomes conditional, because your self regard depends on the positive regard given by the others. So when positive regard becomes conditional, your self regard also becomes conditional. We began to value ourselves only if we meet the standards imposed by the others, rather than achieving true self actualization. So that is how society conditions our whole behavior. Now this whole concept of culture and society, actually initially we started to actualize our potential only, and when certain time passes, the society itself become an entity itself with its own rigid rules and regulations. Now later on, when many people become part of that society, now that whole societal condition may not be in touch with actualizing tendency of all individuals. It may be in touch with certain individuals, may find expression, but many individuals may not find expression of actualizing tendency in the societal rule, because society becomes very rigid and strong with rules and regulation and norms, which will not change because of one person. So that is why so society itself is not a bad thing. Only issue is that it initially was created for fulfilling the actualizing tendency, but later it becomes an entity itself with its own rigid structure that may become problematic for certain individuals. So that is the idea behind it. Since this external standard often do not consider individuals' need, because it may not be in touch with all the individuals, many people struggle to meet them, leading difficulties in maintaining self-esteem and actualizing potential. That is where many people find it difficult to lead a life in true sense of their potential, true sense of their actualizing tendency. Now all the concept that we discussed, now it is summarized in this diagram or the model. Now if you see this chart, all the concepts we have discussed one by one. Now let us see how all these concepts actually interact with each other. Now if you see this side, this is basically a journey when there is no obstruction in the path of actualizing tendency. Whatever inherent potential you have, you are able to express it smoothly. No one is obstructing you. So this is the left side one, is showing this path. If everything goes well in your life, this will be the path. So what is happening? So you have an actualizing potential, actualizing tendency. This actualizing tendency gives you something called as an organismic valuing. That means you know what is good for you. A natural evolutionary sense is there. There is a natural tendency that you want to express something. Maybe somebody wants to express, let us say somebody has a potential for painting or a writing, whatever it is. So organismic valuing will automatically direct you towards those directions, because that is there within you. It wants to express itself. So if one is in touch with actualizing tendency, organismic valuing will guide them to find the right kind of things in their life, right kind of activities, and let us say while pursuing those right activities, they are getting positive regard. No one is obstructing, no one is creating problem. They are getting, so love and affection, nurturance, there is no problem and obstacle. They are getting positive regard. Now if they get positive regard, automatically they will have positive self regard. So if people are giving love and affection to you, automatically you will also have a positive self regard about yourself. We only kind of question ourselves when others are saying negative things about you, so you doubt about your self esteem. But when you are getting positive regard, positive self regard is a natural outcome. Now, if we are in touch with positive self regard, we will end up in something called as a real self. So, this is the real self that inherently you want to become. So, this is a real self, which is the real self in a true sense. This is what you are really, you are in the core of your being. So, if you follow this pathway, automatically you will end up to your real self. Now, this generally does not happen in most of us lives. So, what happens? Why this does not happen? Because our life is not isolated life, that everything generally goes like this. We have to interact, this actualization tendency interact with the society. So, society has its rules, regulations, norms and values, what should be pursued, what should not be pursued, lot of conditions. Now, this society leads to something called as conditions of worth that we discussed. So, it will interact with organismic valuing. So, now organismic valuing wants to do something, but let us say people in the society will say this is a worthless thing, you should do that. So, there will be kind of interaction, and many times we may not follow that organismic valuing process, we may follow conditions of worth, because this condition of worth is main thing for conditional positive regard. So, when you follow those conditions, then you get love and affection from people around you. So, you are forced to kind of follow lot of things which you may not actually want to do. So, that is called as a conditional positive regard. Now, conditional positive regard automatically becomes conditional positive self regard. You also regard yourself only when you fulfill those criteria, you feel yourself worthy. So, you try to fulfill those projections from the outside world, and at the end if you follow those projections, you will end up something called as an ideal self. Now, this is a self that is projected by others, this is not your real self. Somewhere you become somebody else because it was projected by other people. So, that is called ideal self. And Rogers said, if there is a discrepancy between these two selves, if there are discrepancies or incongruence, the person will feel lot of unhappiness, lot of restlessness, which is called as a neurosis. More the gap between this real self and ideal self, more will be your neurosis. This means more of emotional instability, lack of peace and lack of happiness and those things, because your real self is something else, but you have become something else. So, that is called incongruence between real self and ideal self. So, this could get expressed in the life of many people, and as a result people may lot of psychological disturbances and issues may come up. So, somebody, the real self expression may wants to become, let us say somebody wants to become a painter, but because society does not, let us say, gives much value to it, or parents does not want their children to go in that direction, they will be forced into other directions or other lucrative professions, let us say. Person may get success in those areas also, no doubt about it, but the thing is that he will end up into its ideal self. This ideal self, he may not be very comfortable or may not be too much happy with that ideal self, because it is not his or her real self. So, the more discrepancy is there, the more will be the incongruence, and person may experience more emotional problems and so on. So, this is how this whole picture actually plays out in the lives of many people. Now, having said that, does not mean everybody in the society will experience that. Many people find their expression in the society itself also, but for some individual, lot of individuals may not find tune with the societal conditions, and they don't find themselves in the tune with those conditions of worth in terms of their actualizing tendency. Then this kind of discrepancy may arise, and it may create kind of neurosis and so on. So, the concept of real self, self concept and ideal self are other things that kind of is a natural outcome of this model. So, he made this distinction. Real self, as we already discussed, is the underlying organismic self, essentially the genetic blueprint of the person we are capable of becoming under completely favorable circumstances. So, as I said, the left side of the model, when everything is completely favorable here, we end up, it is a genetic blueprint of that life process that we end up into real self. In such ideal conditions, our behavioral choice would be guided by our actualizing tendency, making self actualization achievable for everyone after accumulating enough life experiences to discover what brings true fulfillment. However, Rogers argued that these ideal conditions are rarely, if ever, met. Generally, this is not met in most of the lives of human beings. So, the concept of self concept is something very important. As children grow, they become they also socialize, they develop a sense of their self, who they are, which Roger terms their self concept. So, we all develop a sense of self concept, who am I, by after interacting and learning about ourselves. This self concept is the perception of ourselves. How do I perceive myself? That is my self concept. It is largely based on how others have described and evaluated us. It also, we accumulate this sense of self concept by how others reactions, how others define us, like that. For instance, being told by a family members, you are a clever boy, or you are a good looking one. So, these things slowly we incorporate, and it becomes a part of self concept. We internalize this description as a part of our identity. To assess your self concept, generally we ask question, who am I? Most people can readily list certain adjectives which they think about themselves. Basically, this is the whole idea of self concept. This ideal self, so real self we have discussed, that is in the genetic blueprint that kind of get expressed itself when everything is favorable. In the ideal self, Rogers' theory of personality, it is a version of oneself that is individual aspires to based on the certain conditions projected to them. It encompasses one's goals, ambitions and attributes they strive to possess. Ideal self is shaped by personal desires and societal expectations, representing what a person believes they should achieve in their life. So, it is based on what they believe they should do, based on projections from societies. Sometimes it is also some personal desires which comes from the outside world. So, that is the ideal version of ourselves that we want to become based on certain external projections. Now, this incongruence between the real self and the ideal self creates neurosis, as we already seen in the model. So, according to Roger, this aspect of our being rooted in the actualizing tendency, guided by organismic valuing, nurtured by positive regard and self regard is called real self, as we discussed how it end up into real self. The real self represents the you that you will become if everything proceeds well, your true self. Conversely, when society imposes conditions of worth that conflict with the actualizing tendency and organismic valuing, leading to only conditional positive regard, self regard, we develop ideal self, which Roger also sometimes called as a self concept. We develop a concept of ourself, which is an ideal self. Real self is the true self, it is not a concept, but ideal self is a concept we develop from the outside world. So, this ideal self is not a genuine representation of ourself, but rather unattainable standard we strive to meet. So, certain standard we think that we should be doing based on certain expectations from outside and so on. The disparity between this real self and ideal self, I am versus the I should be, is called incongruity. Larger this gap, greater is the incongruity, which leads to increased suffering. So, more you will feel not at peace with yourself. So, the more you are in tune with, the lesser the gap, more peaceful you will feel inside yourself. Rogers equated this incongruence with neurosis, describing it as being out of sync with one's true self. So, this is what we discuss in the model. Our self concept is socially constructed, meaning we tend to judge ourselves based on what others thinks rather than on our own feelings. So, that is basically ideal self that we talked about. This behavior is driven by the high need for positive regard, because we all want positive regard from other people. We want attention, love and affection from other people. So, whatever conditions put forth by other peoples, we all try to fulfill them without considering what we truly want. So, that leads to the concept of ideal self. Rogers suggested that this need for positive regard can overwhelm our organismic valuing. Then we kind of forget what is our true tendency because of this expectation from outside world, because we want positive regard from them. And many times we lose touch with that organismic valuing and actualizing tendency. Only when raised with sufficient unconditional positive regard, when a person is raised with unconditional positive regard, where he is generally given freedom to express oneself in a protective environment, then people are more likely to express their true self, true or real self. So, better the match between the two, the more psychologically healthy we will be as adults. Rogers believed that parents and educational establishments should create supportive environment that foster creativity and allow for curiosity, self-reliance and respect for others and ourselves within the safe limits. So, obviously, there has to be limit. You cannot just allow everybody to do anything they want. There has to be limit, but within that limit there has to be certain freedom should be given. so that they can express their actualizing tendency more and more. So, educational institutions and other things are very important in terms of fulfilling those tendencies. Now, Carl Rogers talked about fully functioning person, So, what it likes to be a fully functioning person who is in touch with real self and so on. So, according to Rogers, the purpose of therapy is to make a person fully functioning, so that he functions in a much better way. So, the end point of self actualization process is fully functioning person. This individual is characterized by high degree of openness to experience and self acceptance with few if any conditions of worth. So, mostly a fully functioning person will be characterized with, they will be very open to experiences and they will have lot of self acceptance. So, self acceptance comes when you do not do everything based on what others expectations. So, there is a natural self acceptance whatever you are doing. So, natural sense of positive regard, and you are open to many new experiences. There will be less conditions of worth on that individual, or at least they will not allow too much of conditions of worth to distort their behavior. So, they possess positive self concept and high self esteem, that will be another characteristics. Their organismic valuing process guides their life choices. So, they will be in touch with actualizing tendency and their organismic valuing process will guide them, making them less influenced by others' expectation. So, they will be less influenced by others' expectation, they will do what they love to do, and they will be less influenced by judgments and expectations of others. When they make mistakes, they can acknowledge them openly and learn from them. So, they will not be defensive in terms of all the time justifying themselves why they did. If they did something wrong, they will accept it. So, they will be less defensive. In terms of personal relationship, the fully functioning individual respect the rights of others and cares deeply for them. These individuals display high levels of unconditional positive regard for the people in their lives and are capable of forming deep meaningful relationships. So, they themselves will express unconditional positive regard. So, they will not judge people too much, they will allow other people to express whatever they want to do in their life, because they themselves value that. So, they will also express that in their relationships. So, that makes them capable of forming deep meaningful relationships. When people become too judgmental, they are not able to form relationship with other people, because they all the time judge people, and if people are not fitting in their judgment, they will have conflicts. So, flexibility is not there. So, very briefly we will be talking about the therapy of Carl Rogers, because his whole theory actually came out of therapy. So, his therapy is essentially called as client centered therapy or person centered therapy. It is a non-directive form of talk therapy that emphasizes clients' capacity for self direction and understanding of their development. So, it's called client centered or person centered therapy simply because the focus is on the person, and it is non-directed. So, therapist does not give too much of direction what to do, what not to do. They generally provide only loving atmosphere, and they believe that the person himself or herself can find out the solutions given in the right atmosphere. So, Carl Rogers identified 3 core conditions of therapists or characteristics of therapist. A therapist, an ideal therapist, should show these characteristics, and these characteristics will create an environment where healing will happen automatically. A lot of people will automatically heal from their psychological problems and issues. What are these 3 conditions? One is unconditional positive regard, second is empathy, third is genuineness or congruence. So, let us see what are these three things. So, unconditional positive regard, as we have already discussed about conditional positive regard. In society, most of the people give conditional positive regard. If you fulfill certain criteria, certain conditions, then only you will be loved and accepted. So, that is called conditional positive regard. Now, in case of unconditional positive regard means there is no conditions. So, that is the idea of unconditional positive, meaning that the complete acceptance and support. As an individual, you are accepted completely. That does not mean the person will not say if you do something bad. Only thing is that as a person you will be completely accepted regardless of what the client says or does. Everybody may have many positive and negative dimensions, but you are accepted as a person. You may be guided to do right thing and so on. That is a different thing, but that acceptance of the person is unconditional. This is a typical unconditional positive regard example is given, the mother's love. even though child may not be good in everything, but mother's love is unconditional, generally people say. She accepts the child, in whatever the form it is. She may scold also, but the acceptance is unconditional. So, that is the typical case of unconditional positive regard. It creates safe and non-judgmental environment where clients feel free to express their true thoughts and feeling. When a therapist become unconditional positive regard orientation is there, then the client become very comfortable, because then they feel they are not judged. So, they will be able to express whatever they want to express, and the moment they are able to express all the problems, a lot of solution automatically happens in that moment only, if they are able to express all everything. So, that is called unconditional positive regard, and this is something very important in the therapy session, also in the everybody's life also. Second is empathy. So, empathy is striving to understand client's experiences and feelings from the client's perspective. So, you do not impose your own ideas. Generally people have their own thought processes and they impose it on others. That is not empathy. When you are empathetic, you are trying to understand how that person is thinking, how that person is feeling. From their perspective, you are trying to understand. So, when a client comes to you, a therapist is not supposed to impose their things on them. It is more important that they should understand what is their viewpoint, what is their experiences of life from their perspective. So, that is the empathy, which is very important to understand the person. So, this deep empathic understanding helps client feel heard and valued, fostering trust and openness in the therapeutic relationship. So, this is very important in a therapeutic relation, also in the real life situation also. The third one is genuineness or congruence. So, therapists are encouraged to genuine and transparent with their clients. This involves being authentic and honest rather than adopting a professional facade. Congruence helps build a real trustworthy relationship. So, that means the therapist should not be fake in terms of their expression. They should be genuine and honest in terms of giving feedback and in terms of make the relationship with the client. So, this they should not be too in terms of too much of professional facade and not genuine, and then that actually blocks a lot of things. So, congruence helps a trustworthy relationship between the therapist and the client, which also is very important in terms of the healing of the person. So, if you see all these qualities, now this became hallmark for almost all the therapies. So, the lot of therapies may follow, let us say, psychoanalysis or follow some cognitive therapy and so on, but these became hallmark for almost all therapy sessions for all the schools of thoughts. So, these were found to be very important in terms of for successful therapies and so on. So, Rogers asserted that these three core qualities, unconditional positive regard, empathy and congruence, are both necessary and sufficient for effective therapy. If this is provided, automatically a lot of things will happen. If the therapist shows these three qualities, the client will improve even if no other special techniques are used. If the therapist does not show these three qualities, the client's improvement will be minimum no matter how many techniques are used. So, he gave a lot of importance to creation of such environment in the therapy session, less on techniques given. Some of the other aspects of the client centered therapy are non-directiveness, that is where not specific techniques or directions are given, more of focus is given on the atmosphere. The client leads the discussion, the therapist follow the client's lead, offer reflections and clarification, but not direction. So, from the client's perspective, they try to understand things and they give leads in terms of from the clients, what the client shows, they basically reflect back if somebody has certain problems or not. They will automatically understand if somebody reflects unconditionally, not much direction is needed. And also they focus on the present moment. The client centered therapy emphasizes the importance of present moment. Past experience obviously acknowledged, they are important, but what is more important is that what can you do in the present moment, because past is gone, you cannot do anything about it. Future is imaginary, we do not know what is the future look like, but the present moment is the only real moment where you can make changes and brings positive changes. So, the primary focus is on clients' current feelings, thoughts and behavior and how they can achieve self actualization here and now. These are other focuses. and obviously the goal is self-actualization. The ultimate goal of client-centered therapy is to help client achieve self-actualization through these processes, realizing full potential and becoming fully functioning person. Now, let us discuss few criticisms that Rogers' theory had. Obviously, his theory is generally received a lot of positive attention and research. It is widely embraced, but every theory cannot be 100% in terms of accepted. Few criticisms are there, like one is that this theory lacks structure, means, and that is actually what is the focus by Carl Rogers. He was not interested into structure. So, one criticism is that client centered therapies lacks structure because it is more focused on creating environment, which is sometimes maybe not so easy for a lot of people. Some argue that non-directive nature of the therapy might not be suitable for all clients, particularly those prefer more guidance and specific techniques. So, in certain cases where specific guidance are needed, in those cases probably client centered therapy may not be that suitable. Second criticism is overemphasis on self-actualization. Rogers' theory places heavy emphasis on the concept of self-actualization as the ultimate goal of personal development. Critics argue that this emphasis might not be applicable and relevant for all individuals and cultures, as different cultures might prioritize different values and goals. So, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but this is what Rogers was finding out from his perspective. Many critics argue that this may not be for everybody, in terms of connecting dots with their self-actualization. People also kind of see that Rogers' theory may not be very suitable in case of severe psychopathologies, patient with severe problems, because patient should have certain understanding in order to give all this impacted by this creation of environment and so on. People with schizophrenia and severe personality disorders, obviously a lot of the psychotherapies are not suitable for severe psychopathology. Most of these cases are treated by psychiatrists, where medicines are given. When they become little comfortable and more in touch with reality, then only therapies are given. So, severe psychopathology, obviously client centered therapy, or for that matter many other therapies may not be suitable. So, there is a limited applicability for these things. Some also argue some definitions are not very clear, or there is an ambiguity involved in it, such as concept of self and self-actualizations. In terms of research, proper structured definitions are not there, but this is how this whole approach of humanistic psychology is, that they are focused on certain ideas which are central to them, and despite all this criticism, obviously these criticisms are very minor criticisms, but Rogers' theory has been widely accepted by people. Particularly it has wide application in therapy sessions. In all the schools of therapies integrate these ideas. So, these are some of the ideas about Carl Rogers' theory. So, within humanistic perspective, we talked about Maslow's theory and Carl Rogers' theory. We will not talk beyond these two theories. So, with this I stop here, and this module ends here. We will talk about other theories in the next module. With this I stop here. Thank you.